Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss principles of dimensioning. In the last class we have discussed what are the different types of lines used in drawing, and I think everybody is clear about that. All of you must remember the most important thing is thick lines and thin lines. If we have understood that one properly about thick lines and thin lines, there are two things which you have to keep in mind while drawing very clearly. Although every other line is very important, but most of the times, or throughout the drawing, each and every single drawing will be coming across these two lines, thick lines and thin lines. If you mess up with this, the drawing will be a total disaster. It will completely spoil the look of the drawing. And next topic, or the next item, which is very important in engineering drawing or any drawing for that matter, is dimensioning. So just like drawing gives shape description, or dimensioning gives size description. So any drawing is incomplete without proper dimensioning. This is very important, because we already discussed that engineering drawing is language of the engineers. So when we send a drawing, if there is no dimension, we don't know what to do with the drawing. Another engineer will never know what to do with the drawing. However, we are not going to the depths of it, how to do dimensioning, different types of dimensioning and all those things, which is not necessary for you in the first year of engineering. We will discuss the basic things which are necessary, very important, because every drawing has to be dimensioned. Whatever is necessary for you in this particular semester, we are going to discuss that. How to do dimensioning, how to write the dimension, the value of the dimension, and all those things. First we will discuss different terminology used in dimensioning, or you can say nomenclature or terminology, right? So first we have extension line. Second thing is dimension line. Third, termination of the dimension. Termination of dimension line. And finally we have dimension value. So in any dimensioning, these are the four things that are necessary. First is extension line, then comes the dimension line, then how to terminate the dimension line, how to write the value of the dimension. We will take some feed for simple drawings, and then we will discuss these things in detail. I will take a simple drawing here to explain the above four. For example, I have a drawing like this. Okay, and I will take another drawing, a simple triangle. Done. You can erase this. Done. Now the first thing is extension line. We're discussing about extension line, right? So in any given drawing, so first we have to draw whatever the feature that I am dimensioning. To that feature I have to draw the, let us say I want to dimension this line, I have to draw extension lines. Right, these extension line, always remember, extension line should always be perpendicular to the feature that we are dimensioning. So in this case you can see I want to dimension this particular line. I want to give dimension to this particular line. So I am drawing extension line perpendicular to the line. Let us say I want to dimension this particular line here in the triangle. So when I draw extension line for this, most of the students, they will draw extension lines like this, which is wrong. So the extension line should always be perpendicular. Please remember this. It should always be perpendicular to the line or the feature that we are dimensioning. So when I draw the extension line here, I have to draw perpendicular to these two lines. Understand? The second one is the dimension line. The second is the dimension line, and this dimension line should always be parallel to the feature that we are dimensioning. Parallel to the feature of the object or the line that we are dimensioning. So when I want to dimension this particular line here, I will draw line parallel to this. Same is the case here in the triangle. I have to draw line parallel to the line that we are dimensioning. Okay, so we are done with extension line, we are done with dimension line, and next comes the termination of dimension line. Termination. So this dimension line has to be terminated, and the standard that we are following is to terminate it with the arrowhead, filled arrowhead. Filled arrowhead. Same is the case here. There are different ways of terminating, but however we are following this as a standard. We have to terminate the dimension line with a filled arrowhead, and then comes finally the dimension value. So dimension value should always be written above the dimension line. Let us say this is 20 mm. I can write like this, and let us say in the case, let us say this is 20 mm above the dimension line. Value should be written always above the dimension line. There are cases where we will write in between, so we will discuss that later, but the standard general format is like this. First we will draw the extension lines. So extension lines perpendicular to the feature, and then we will draw the dimension line parallel to the feature that we are dimensioning, and then we will terminate with the arrowheads, termination at the end of the dimension line, and then we will write the value, dimension value above the dimension line. Here I will show you one figure which describes or shows all the parts of dimensioning. Just focus that a little bit. And here one more thing that I want to tell you, this arrowhead that we are drawing generally it is taken as, if this is 1 unit, height is 1 unit, the width or the height is 1 unit, then the length is usually 3 units. It's not that every time whenever we are drawing we will measure this is 1 and 3, 1 and 3, 1 and 3. It comes by practice, but this is the standard that we have to follow, and this should be a filled arrowhead. Filled arrowhead. And while dimensioning we have to be careful the height of the arrowheads and all. Some students, let us say, have a small diagram like this. For example, when they dimension, they will draw everything fine, but the arrowheads will be something like this. So the arrowheads dominate the entire figure. We cannot even know where the figure is. When this happens to the entire drawing sheet, we can only see the arrowheads and the dimension lines throughout the drawing sheets. So the arrowhead that you are drawing should be neat, simple and small. And you need not measure every time 1:3 and all, but general by practice you get that. The height, but the standard is the height should be 1 mm or 1 unit, and the length of the arrowhead should be 3 units. So here we will see one small simple figure where all the details of the dimensioning are given, and how we went to draw this extension line, dimension line and all other things. Just focus here. You can see this figure here. So a simple drawing is being taken here. So now the same things whichever we discussed in the previous one I will show here. So first thing here, you can see extension lines are drawn perpendicular, these two lines, but one small observation, there should be a gap of at least 1 mm between the feature and the extension lines that you are drawing. So here you can see there is 1 mm gap between the extension line and the feature that we are dimensioning. And then you have drawn dimension line parallel, terminated with a filled arrow head. there are certain details that you can see. 2 mm past the dimension line. That means the extension line that we are drawing, or sometimes this is also called as projection line, that we are drawing should be at least 2 mm behind or 2 mm past after the dimension line. And one most important thing that I want to mention here, all the dimension lines, the extension, be it extension line, dimension line, projection line, arrowheads, everything should be drawn with the thin lines. You can observe here, projection lines are thin lines and may cross over when necessary. Next, here also you can see dimension lines are thin lines. Except the main drawing, you should remember from our previous discussion, except the main drawing, everything else that is used for construction of the drawing, that is supporting the drawing or describes the drawing, everything should be in thin lines. Only the main drawing should be drawn with the thick lines. You can see that in this particular figure. And keep this point very much in the mind, because many students when drawing, they will draw most of them will draw dimension line and the extension line and all these things with the thick lines, which will spoil the main drawing, details of the main drawing. So this is about your dimensioning of the features. There are certain other things that I will discuss now. So hopefully everybody understood these things. So each time when you are drawing, you have to keep these points in mind. So keeping a small gap, you need not measure it to be 1 mm or 2 mm, just a small gap as near as possible. You have to give a small gap and draw the extension lines or the projection lines, and then draw the dimension line, and the dimension should always be above the dimension line. So here you can see certain, in this area you can see the arrowheads are given outside the extension line. So this thing we will do when the gap between the feature, when there is very less gap between the features, right? And this is a different type of dimension. Don't think that this is the length, the 6 mm that is shown here is not this length. This is a projected length 6 mm. Whenever the gap is very small, we will draw the dimension line. We will draw the dimension line, and the termination or the arrowheads will be given outside the dimension line. And you can see arrowheads are placed on the outside of the projection line for smaller dimension, and the arrowhead should touch the projection line at the extremities of the dimension. So this is how we will do when the gap is very small. Otherwise, usually it is always done like this. Okay. And as far as possible, when we are dimensioning a number of features in a single drawing, we should ensure that these lines did not overlap on each other. Okay. Anyway, those things you will learn later as you come across. In your first year of drawing, almost for the first 4 or 5 chapters, you will not come across these problems. Only when it comes to isometric or orthographic projections in the last unit, that is when you will come across these problems. But please do keep these things in mind. So now we will see how to dimension curved features. These are all linear features that you have seen. A curved feature, be it a circle, be it an arc, be it an angle, how to dimension those things. So let me take a simple circle. So I'm drawing with a free hand, so please excuse for the shapes, they're not perfectly right. So if you can understand the concept, that is sufficient. Assume that this is a circle, time being, although it doesn't look like so. So now, circle can be dimensioned with its diameter or its radius. We can do either way. So there are different ways of doing it. So one way is take 2 tangents from the center, that is the center, so you will get the diameter here, you will not draw the diameter, you can take 2 tangents like this. So these are your extension lines now. So between these two we can draw the dimension line and then terminate with the arrowhead, and above that you will write, let us say this has a diameter of 30 mm, so you can write it as 530. So diameter is indicated by phi in the drawing. Wherever you see phi, it indicates diameter. Okay, this is one way of doing. Other one is directly inside. This is the center. So anywhere you can draw, take the diameter, passing through the center, terminate it with the arrowheads, and above the diameter directly you can write as 530. This is one way of dimensioning a circuit, right? So or else we can take, I will take another circle here. Let us say this is the center, so you can draw a radius like this, and with the arrowhead, and then pull a line outside, then you can write capital R 15. So radius is always indicated by capital R. Okay, or else you can take another circle, simply directly on the dimension line itself I can simply write R15. Is one way of doing it. So different ways we can dimension a circuit, all are correct. Okay, this line that I have drawn here, this is called as leader line. Leader line. In drawing, whenever we want to explain some features, so we will pull it outside like this and then draw a line, and on that we can write the description of this. So such a line is called as leader line, on which we write the description of the drawing. Okay, in this case we are describing the circle with radius R15, so we have pulled it out and then we have written it. So either any of these ways, whichever is convenient for us in a particular drawing, we can dimension the circle in this way, right? So now let us say I have an arc with some radius, right? You can follow the same thing. You will find the center of the arc, you will get the center of the arc. From the center you can just draw a line, and then you can write some arc 20 or 30. This is one way of doing it. Or just like the previous case, you can draw the center like this, pull the leader line outside, and then here you can write R30. That is also acceptable. So you can follow any of these two methods for dimensioning an arc. Let us say I have an angle. I want to dimension an angle, right? So this is some angle theta. Okay. So this we can do two ways. If the angle is big enough or the lines are big enough, we can draw the curved line like this, end it with the arrowheads, and then we can mention here, let us say this is some 40 degrees, you can write 40 degrees. Very simple. Or else let us say we have a very smaller angle, let us say somewhere around 10 or 15 degrees. Okay, we don't have a place, then you can hold the dimension line outwards, you can terminate with the arrowheads just like the way we saw in the linear dimensioning, and above this you can write some 15 degrees. Okay, these are different things that you come across, right? So here you are seeing linear dimensioning. Always remember dimensioning of inclined lines, right? If you are taking this length, that will be the projected length of this line, but not the actual length of this line. So if you are dimensioning the actual length, sorry for this, here you have a small mistake, it should come here, right? So extension line should always be perpendicular to the feature that we are dimensioning, and parallel line should always be parallel to the feature, dimension line should always be parallel to the feature that we are dimensioning, and dimension line should be terminated with an arrow head, and then above the dimension line we have to write the value dimension. So this is all about dimensioning. There are many things we can discuss. Actually it's a full chapter in your textbook, but then we are focusing only on those things which you come across in your engineering drawing, first year engineering drawing. Hope everybody understood this. Please make at least one practice of this. Take some diagrams from your textbook and start dimensioning it and learn it, which is very, very important. So hope all of you understood and you will follow these instructions while drawing. Thank you all.